My name is Helen Marston. I am 70 years old. I've lived alone for 17 years now, since my husband Robert passed away in his sleep. Heart failure, they said. It was a quiet end, and in some ways, I suppose he was lucky. Not everyone gets to slip out like that. One minute you're here, and the next, the house is a little colder, a little quieter, and no one else notices, except the one left behind. I didn't remarry. I didn't travel the world like some of the other widows in my Sunday book club. I stayed. In the same house Robert and I bought when Jason was born. We planted roses in the back together, painted the porch swing every spring, and built a life of small rituals. After he was gone, I kept them up. The swing still gets painted, though no one sits in it anymore but me. I see my son often. Jason is 44, a financial analyst. He lives across town in one of those modern houses with too much glass and not enough bookshelves. I visit him and his wife Laura twice a week, once on Wednesdays when I bring soup or pie, and again on Sundays after church, just to sit a while with the grandkids while they run wild between the rooms. Laura, my daughter-in-law, is polite in the way a woman is taught to be. She says, "Thank you," before closing the door behind me. Not too forcefully, but firm enough to feel like punctuation. I don't push. I've lived long enough to know the difference between welcome and tolerated, and I've learned not to confuse proximity with warmth. Still, I keep coming. I cook, I fold laundry, I wipe tiny handprints off the glass tables. I listen when no one thinks I do. I watch without staring. I smile without speaking. I don't interfere, but I observe. You see, I may be old, but I am not invisible. I have known this house before Laura walked into it in her white wedding dress with a bouquet of cream lilies that smelled too strong. I was here before the children's toys littered the living room, before Jason stopped playing his old jazz records, before the hallway walls were painted gray to match the Pinterest board. I remember what it was like when love lived here, not as decoration, but as presence. They think I'm fading, that my mind has softened like the cushions on the couch. But they forget. I remember where the cracks are in the tiles. I know which drawer sticks. I notice when a smile is half a second late or when perfume changes its notes midweek. I am not a guest in this house. I am its silent memory. And memories, my dear, are patient things. So I sit, I help, I clean, I nod, but I never forget. That's who I am, and one day that will matter. It started with the earrings, small emerald green studs, not flashy, but expensive, tasteful. Laura wore them one Thursday afternoon when I came to watch the children. She wasn't expecting me. Jason had called in a rush that morning, asking if I could come over early because their nanny was down with a fever. I arrived with a basket of soup, my hair still damp from the rain. Laura was heading out, purse in hand, lipstick perfect, hair freshly styled. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, you're here already?" she said, smiling too tightly. "I have an appointment, just routine." I nodded. I always nodded. But I saw the earrings and the shoes. Suede, high-heeled, not the kind you wear to a doctor's office. Her perfume was stronger than usual, the kind meant to linger. Jason, bless him, noticed none of it. He was working late more and more these days. He trusted. He always had. And Laura, well, she knew how to play her part. She kept the house neat, the children fed, the dinner plated by 7. But I had lived long enough to know that performance and presence were not the same thing. A week later, there was a necklace, a fine silver chain with a tiny diamond at its center. I'd never seen it before, but she wore it like it had always been hers. Again, I said nothing. I simply took note, another entry in my mind's ledger. Then came the late nights, not Jason's, Laura's. She began stepping out after dinner, saying she needed fresh air or errands or a quick meetup with an old friend. I watched her leave from the window above the sink as I did dishes. Always the same, dressed well, walking fast, glancing at her phone. One evening, I stayed longer than usual, pretending to lose track of time as I read to the children. Jason was upstairs on a conference call. Laura left again around 8:45. She didn't return until nearly 11. She looked flushed, slightly breathless. She didn't speak as she came in, but she looked up at the camera by the front door, just a flicker of her eyes. I watched it all. The next day, I bought a small USB drive. I pulled the camera feed onto my old laptop, learning the system just well enough to extract what I needed. It wasn't hard. Nothing is too hard when you're motivated, especially when the motivation is your child's peace of mind. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't warn or accuse or even sigh. Instead, I began documenting, carefully, quietly, like a librarian curating a forgotten archive. I took pictures of the screen when she returned late. I noted the outfits. I made a small table on paper. Dates, times, duration away. I checked credit card receipts on the counter while tidying up, noting names of restaurants and boutique stores Jason would never choose. I found a small matchbook in her coat pocket once, a hotel downtown, the kind with a bar that stays open past midnight. My hands didn't shake as I made copies. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering when it had started, wondering if Jason had any idea, or if he'd buried his suspicions the way good men sometimes do when they love too loyally. But the moment I truly understood, the moment I stopped wondering and started preparing, came quietly. It was a Tuesday. I'd just finished folding towels and was heading down the hallway when I heard her voice through the baby monitor, not the kind that records children's cries, the monitor that linked to their phones and speakers around the house. Laura had left hers on in the guest room. Her voice, light and careless, drifted through. "Don't worry, he's completely clueless, works late, comes home tired, kisses the kids, doesn't ask questions. And Helen? Please. She's sweet but old. She wouldn't understand if I told her I was seeing aliens." Laughter. Something inside me, very old, very still, shifted. It wasn't the betrayal that pierced me. It was the dismissal, the belief that age makes you blind, that kindness is weakness, that silence is ignorance. She thought I was just a figure in a chair, a woman with a worn-out sweater and a spoon in her hand, not someone with a mind like a locked drawer. I smiled that night, not because I enjoyed what I was learning, but because I knew something she didn't. I knew how to wait, and I had time. By the time the third month passed, I had 3 folders, one digital on a password-protected flash drive I carried in my coat pocket, one paper neatly tucked in an old manila envelope inside my linen cabinet, and one in my mind, the most complete, the most human, the one built not only of facts, but of tones, glances, and timing. It's true what they say. We remember feelings more than words. But I kept both. Each Wednesday and Sunday, I added more, not just to the folders, but to my understanding. It became a habit, quiet and methodical, like watering a plant no one else sees growing. I copied restaurant receipts, made screen captures of the front door footage, and began logging Laura's calls when she was careless enough to leave her phone within reach. I didn't pry, not the way most would understand it. I simply let her own behavior speak louder than anything I could say. Once, I found a note in her purse when I helped her bring in groceries. "Room 412, same as last time. Can't wait." It was folded with a $20 bill and a receipt from a luxury lingerie store. I didn't touch it, just read it and left it exactly where it was. But that evening, as I sipped my tea, I added the details to my journal: the room number, the store, the date. Another time, while clearing out the back seat of her car where the boys had spilled crackers, I found a scarf, silk, red, not hers. It smelled of musk and aftershave. I didn't mention it. I didn't need to. There was power in not accusing, in never raising my voice, in keeping my place, not submissively, but strategically. Every time Laura looked at me with that bland politeness, I felt her mistake deepen. She thought I was harmless, disposable, a background character. She never realized I had turned our weekly interactions into an intelligence operation, a quiet, deliberate act of preservation, not of myself, but of my son's dignity. I began cross-referencing things, her girls' dinners with hotel bookings, her jewelry appearances with online shipping dates and the household budget. I noted when Jason's card showed strange cash withdrawals, always during her so-called yoga retreats. I knew someone who worked at the hotel, a kind young woman named Mireya who used to attend church with me before she moved. A few emails exchanged under the pretense of checking on my nephew's wedding options, and I had confirmation of several overnight stays under a different male name booked and billed, but to Jason's joint account, all documented, all quiet. It became less about proving a betrayal and more about understanding its full anatomy. Like a coroner, I wasn't angry. I was simply thorough. And then came the final stitch, the one that sealed the whole quilt. It was evening. The house was calm. Jason was upstairs bathing the kids. Laura was in the kitchen with a glass of wine, scrolling her phone. I stood just outside the doorway folding a dish towel when she spoke again. Not to me, not even to the children. She was on the phone. She didn't hear me come in. She never did. I swear it's almost too easy. He doesn't notice a thing. I keep the house clean, smile at the old lady, and boom, freedom. A pause. No, she's sweet. Kind of slow, you know? Harmless. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply turned and walked out to the porch. The autumn wind had just begun to change. Leaves rustled along the sidewalk like whispers in code. I sipped my tea, the mug warm against my fingers, my face calm. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already printed it all. The camera had audio, too. That call? Saved, archived, time-stamped, dated, a crisp, cruel line preserved in digital clarity. I wasn't collecting stories. I was building a record, a chronicle of deceit that required no narration, no interpretation, no commentary, only delivery. And soon the right moment would come, because there always is one. You just have to wait long enough to meet it eye to eye. The invitation came in an email. From Laura's account, of course. Short, efficient. Please join us to celebrate Jason's 45th birthday. Dinner at 6:30, followed by cake and a toast. I stared at the line. Your presence means a lot, and thought how little they knew what that presence would bring this year. I had known the date was approaching. His birthday was circled on the calendar in my kitchen with a small red heart, the kind I used to draw when he was a child. Back then, the birthdays were simpler. Streamers taped to the cabinets, chocolate cake made from scratch, Robert standing with a camcorder, capturing Jason as he blew out candles with sticky fingers and gap-toothed grins. But this birthday, this one was going to be different. I began preparing a week in advance. Not food, not a present from a store, but the box. I chose a wooden one, small, sturdy, simple. I lined the inside with burgundy velvet from an old jewelry case and placed the items carefully in a deliberate order. Printouts of the doorbell camera screenshots with timestamps, photocopies of receipts from restaurants and hotel charges, the note from her purse, digitally scanned, hotel booking confirmations, a spreadsheet I'd made, laying out all the girls' nights and the corresponding charges, matched to GPS data from her phone Jason never checked, a USB drive labeled footage, and finally, on top, a handwritten letter, brief, unsentimental, Jason, I have never tried to interfere. That was my promise to your father and to myself. But I see you. I see the wear in your eyes, the way you smile less. I see the difference in how you hold yourself. This is not a punishment. This is not revenge. This is just truth. I knew for months, and I waited so you could receive it in peace, not in shame. I hope you understand that I never stopped seeing the boy who used to fall asleep on my lap. I protect him still. Mom. I tied the box with a navy ribbon, no wrapping paper, just a card taped to the lid. To Jason, from the one who sees. That Saturday, the house was full. Jason's friends, colleagues, neighbors. The children darted between legs and arms, yelling and laughing. Wine glasses clinked. The kitchen was loud with chatter and the smell of glazed ham, rosemary potatoes, and too many kinds of salad. Laura was perfect, of course, the golden hostess. She wore a champagne-colored blouse and tiny diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. She kissed cheeks, laughed at every man's joke, patted backs with the ease of someone who'd curated her audience. I watched quietly from a corner chair, my purse at my feet, the box nestled beside it. I smiled when spoken to, helped serve drinks, picked up napkins from underfoot, the invisible matriarch. At 7:45, the cake came out. Jason's name was piped in cursive frosting. Candles flickered, the lights dimmed. The children screamed, "Happy birthday," slightly off key. He closed his eyes, made a wish, blew them out. Then Laura, all charm, handed him her gift, an engraved watch. The crowd clapped politely. He smiled, though I could see it didn't reach his eyes. And then I stood. The room stilled, a small thing, like when a breeze stops and you don't realize until it's gone. I walked over with my gift and held it out. He looked at the box. "To Jason," I said gently, "from the one who sees." Laughter fluttered uncertainly among the guests. Laura blinked, tight smile. Jason furrowed his brow but took it. No one spoke as he pulled the ribbon loose. He opened the lid slowly. His eyes moved over the first paper, then the second. He reached the spreadsheet, the receipts, the screenshots, and then he stopped. His fingers pressed the velvet edge of the box, still and quiet. The room was hushed now. Conversations died. No music played. The hum of reality seeped in. Laura's smile faltered. She stepped closer, peering into the box. She saw the letter. She saw the files. And then she saw the USB. Her skin turned the color of spoiled milk. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Jason didn't look at her. He looked at me. And I looked back, not sad, not angry, not triumphant, just present. "You've grown up, son," I said, my voice calm. "It's time to accept grown-up gifts." No one clapped. No one laughed. The party was still in full decoration, but it had ended. I turned, picked up my purse, and left the house. No goodbyes, just silence. And behind me, the truth finally doing what it always does. Arrive. Jason didn't speak, not at first. He stood still in the middle of the room, the box open in his hands, the scattered evidence whispering louder than any voice ever could. The candles on the cake still flickered faintly, half melted. The scent of frosting and roasted rosemary mingled with something new, confusion, tension, the electricity of truth beginning to hum beneath polished surfaces. Someone cleared their throat. A guest, nervous, still hoping this might be a misunderstanding, a strange joke, perhaps a quirky memory box from a sentimental mother. But Jason wasn't smiling. He sat down slowly on the edge of the ottoman. The papers rustled as he shifted. With mechanical calm, he lifted the first document, a printout from a hotel booking site. His eyes scanned it. Room 412, weeknight stays, charges to his shared card. Next, the photographs from the security camera, Laura coming and going, dressed not for errands, but for rendezvous. High heels, red lipstick, silk scarves in the wind. Always around 9 p.m., always back before midnight, like a ritual. Then the receipts, dinner for two, Italian, French, sushi, always for two. The letter, my handwriting. He paused, resting a hand over the envelope, but not yet opening it. Not ready. Laura finally stepped forward. Her voice was small, dry. Jason, He didn't raise his eyes. You said you were seeing your sister that night, he murmured. Not to her, not to me, just into the quiet. I was going to, twice a week, he continued, almost as if reading a report. Wednesday dinners, Saturday night yoga, wine receipts, cash withdrawals. Same pattern, same numbers. The crowd of guests, unsure of their roles now, drifted into silence. Some glanced toward the foyer, where their coats and escape awaited. Others looked to the floor. Even the children, sensing the rupture in the room, had gone quiet upstairs. Jason, Laura said again, her voice cracking. Still, he didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the USB drive. You said Helen wouldn't understand, he said flatly. That she was sweet, harmless. Laura flinched. Her fingers trembled. I was being careless. He finally looked up. No, he said. You were being cruel. The box, though small, felt impossibly large between them. A chasm carved from paper and silence. I remained near the doorway. I did not speak again. I did not apologize. I had said all I needed to say. The facts had their own voice now. Jason stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw anything. Instead, he placed the USB into his jacket pocket, pressed the lid of the box closed, and looked around the room. Thank you all for coming, he said, his tone so level it chilled the air. Someone whispered, maybe we should give them space. Chairs creaked. Glasses were set down. Slowly, quietly, the guests gathered their coats, their bags, their birthday cards. No one made eye contact. No one said goodbye. The door opened and closed, again and again, and then silence. Jason turned to me, not accusing, not afraid, just tired. You waited, he said. I nodded. Yes. Why today? I looked at the extinguished candles. Because you are a man now, 45, old enough to be deceived, yes, but also old enough to stop pretending not to see. I waited so the truth wouldn't feel like betrayal. Only clarity. He breathed slowly, rubbed his temple. It hurts. Yes, but it heals too. Later. I didn't hug him. He didn't ask. I left quietly, my steps steady. Outside, the sky was clear, the wind cool. The porch light buzzed above the street, and my car sat beneath a swaying elm tree, waiting like I always had. I drove home in silence, the road unlit but familiar. In my kitchen, I put the kettle on, folded my shawl, listened to the night pressing gently against the windows. Inside that house, the gift had been opened, and now nothing would ever be quite the same again. In every life, there comes a moment that hangs still in time, when something unspoken becomes irreversible. This was that moment. It didn't come with screaming. There was no crash of dishes or slamming of doors, no headlines, no stage, just a quiet kitchen with a birthday cake that no one touched, and a man sitting beside a box that had upended everything he thought he knew. I didn't sleep that night. I made tea, sat by the window. I looked out at the dark garden, the moonlight painting silver lines along the hedges. I wondered what Jason was doing in that same hour, whether he sat awake or wept quietly in the bathroom as I once had, decades ago when I found the letter in Robert's drawer. A letter not for me. I never told Jason about that. He was too young, and Robert had chosen to stay, to change, and we rebuilt. Sometimes silence isn't about fear. It's about space, timing. This was different. The phone rang the next morning. Not early. Jason always respected my mornings. But at 10:04 a.m., the caller ID lit up. Jason, I answered. His voice was steady, stripped of performance, hollow but calm. Thank you. I said nothing at first. Then, are you all right? No, he said, but I'm awake, and I think that's something. We didn't speak about the files, or Laura, or the expression on her face when she realized she wasn't fooling anyone anymore. We didn't talk about the guests or the whispers. He didn't ask how I'd done it, how I'd known, how I'd waited. He only asked one thing. When did you know? 4 months ago. A pause. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I closed my eyes, felt the steam rise from my tea. Because sometimes people need to be ready to receive the truth, not just hear it. You weren't ready yet. You would have defended her, turned against me, broken twice instead of once. He sighed. Deep, honest. I think you're right, he said. I didn't say, I know. That would have been cruel. Instead, I said, you're not broken, Jason. Just changed. Another pause. Then softer. She left this morning. Where? Her mother's. She didn't say how long. I didn't ask if she took the kids. I knew she wouldn't. Not now. Laura was too concerned with image to explain why she would leave her children behind. Too smart to drag them through what was now coming. She didn't argue, he added. Didn't scream. She just looked at me, like she'd finally seen who she was married to. Someone who knew. I thought of my box, the velvet lining, the letter, the stillness of his face. You always knew, I said. You just didn't know how to name it yet. He was quiet. Then, Mom? Yes? I think I'd like to come by Sunday. Just me and the boys. My throat tightened. Of course. Will you make the lemon cake? That surprised me. I haven't made it since. I remember, he said. It was Dad's favorite. Yes. And mine too, I think. I just forgot. I swallowed. I'll bake it. Extra icing. Thanks, Mom. We hung up. I looked at the phone for a while after, the silence around me no longer heavy, but whole. Some moments don't need to be shouted to split the world into before and after. This was that moment. And finally, my son had stepped into it, not broken, but awake. I didn't return to the house that week. Not on Wednesday to check on the kids, not on Sunday for lunch, not even to drop off groceries or send a card. I waited. I've learned over the years that there is a sacred space between an unraveling and a recovery. And in that space, presence can feel like pressure. Sometimes the greatest kindness is absence. I stayed home. I cleaned out the spice cabinet. I refolded the towels. I repotted the ficus plant near the back door that had been leaning too long toward the light. On Friday, I walked down to the corner bakery and bought a single cinnamon roll, the kind with thick icing and just enough raisins. I ate it slowly at a sidewalk table, watching young couples pass by, heads bowed together, secrets tucked between their smiles. The world went on, as it always does. But in Jason's house, I imagined, the silence was different. Not peace, but the hush of things breaking apart. I pictured the children asking where Mommy went. I pictured Jason fumbling through breakfast, not knowing where the cereal was kept or how to braid his daughter's hair. Not because he couldn't learn, but because he had never been allowed to try. That's what betrayal does. It steals not just trust, but confidence. It makes capable people question their worth. And still, I waited until the next Sunday. The doorbell rang at 11:17 a.m. I opened the door, and there he stood, Jason holding a casserole dish with trembling fingers. His eyes were tired but clear, his posture less rigid. Behind him, James and Emily shuffled shyly, holding a drawing and a sunflower, respectively. Hi, Mom. he said. Hi, sweetheart. I, um, I didn't know if we should bring something. I smiled. You brought yourselves. That's more than enough. They came in. I poured lemonade. The kids ran to the bookshelf where I kept the old toys. Jason lingered in the doorway for a moment before sitting. He looked around my living room, the framed photographs, the crocheted blanket draped over the sofa, the vase of lilacs I'd cut that morning. It smells like Dad, he said suddenly. Lilac and wood polish. Yeah, I forgot that smell, but it's home. We didn't speak of Laura, not directly, but as we set the table, Jason paused and said, I took out the trash bins yesterday. There were 5 bags of her things. She didn't pack them. I did, I said nothing. Just passed him the lemon cake. He took a bite, chewed slowly, his voice low. I used to think being loved meant being chosen, but I think it means being seen. I set my fork down. You're right, and it means being safe in the seeing. He nodded. I wasn't, he admitted, not for a long time. We ate in silence for a while. Emily asked for extra whipped cream. James wanted to draw the ficus plant. The house filled with small, ordinary sounds. Spoons clinking, chairs creaking, laughter over a spilled glass of juice. Life in its quiet return. When they left that afternoon, Jason hugged me. Not a polite hug, not an obligatory one. A real one, tight and long, the kind sons give only when they need their mother's steadiness to hold. He pulled back, eyes glassy but calm. I'll be back next week, he said. Just us again. I think it's time we rebuild. You don't have to rush, I said. I don't want to rush, he replied. I want to do it right from now on. After they left, I washed the dishes slowly, let the warm water run over my hands, looked out at the fading afternoon light and the clean, quiet rooms. The silence had changed, not the uneasy stillness of secrets, but the peace of something honest, finally having room to breathe. I had left the party first, but it was they who had been left with the truth, and now they were choosing what to do with it. I had done my part. Now it was their turn to live in the open. Laura didn't fight. When it came, the separation unfolded like a well-rehearsed scene. No raised voices, no court drama, no thrown accusations across a table. Just 2 people sitting at opposite ends of a polished oak desk, signing forms with names they no longer wore comfortably. Jason told me over tea, 3 weeks after the Sunday visit. She didn't contest anything, he said. Not the custody, not the house, nothing. He stirred sugar into his cup, though he never used to. A new habit, perhaps, or just something to do with his hands. She said she didn't have the energy to explain, he added quietly. And maybe that was the truest thing Laura had said in a year. Jason kept the house, not because he wanted it, but because it would be less disruptive for the children. The rooms still carried echoes of her perfumes in the drapes, the sleek furniture, the minimalist artwork she had chosen to look effortless. But slowly, he began to reclaim it. It started with the front hallway. He replaced the metal-framed mirror Laura had insisted on with a wooden one he and I had found at a flea market in his teens. He hung up pictures of the children with smudged hands and crooked grins, not curated, not staged, just real. He brought out my old photo albums, not at once, but one by one. He set them on the coffee table, then flipped through them when the kids fell asleep. And one night he called me, voice full of something tender. Mom, he said, I want real things in the house again, not facades. I didn't ask what he meant. I knew. The divorce paperwork took 7 weeks in total. Jason didn't tell the children the word divorce. He explained that Mommy was living somewhere else for now, that sometimes grown-ups decide to grow differently. He didn't speak badly of her. That was his choice, not for her sake, but for the children's. Because dignity doesn't have to shout, it just has to hold. Laura came once to pick up some things. Jason asked me to be there. I arrived 10 minutes before she did, holding a paper bag of oatmeal cookies for the children. I sat at the kitchen counter while she moved quietly through the house. No eye contact, no pleasantries, just the sound of drawers opening and boxes closing. At one point, she passed the dining room and saw me there. She stopped. We looked at each other. She was thinner, paler. Her lipstick faded, her shoulders slightly hunched. "You always knew," she said. "Yes." She nodded once. "You waited." "I did. I didn't think." "I know." And that was all. She left 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and a jewelry box. Jason didn't walk her out. He stayed upstairs with the kids. After the door closed, he came down and opened a bottle of wine that had sat untouched for months. He poured a glass for himself and offered one to me. I declined. We sat on the porch, watching the quiet street. The dog next door barked. A car passed. The wind carried the smell of early summer, earth and lilac. "It's strange," he said. "I thought I'd feel more grief." "You probably did already," I replied. He nodded. "Now," I said, "you're just feeling what comes after." The clean ache. He looked at me. "You know, I keep remembering the way you stood at my birthday. Not angry, not accusatory, just there. I waited for the right time." "How did you know?" "Because I raised you. I know your silences, and I know when a man is ready to reclaim his own voice." He didn't speak for a while after that, just watched the street. Eventually, the children came down in their pajamas. Emily curled into my side. James asked if they could sleep at Grandma's house next weekend. Jason said yes without hesitation. Laura didn't call. She didn't send messages. The silence from her side of the story stretched on, not empty, but definitive. No scandal, no press, just absence. And within it, Jason began again. Each week, I visited the house not as a helper or a quiet watcher, but as part of a new rhythm. He asked my advice on meals, let me rearrange the living room, brought down the old record player, and played Miles Davis on Saturday mornings. The kids drew pictures that said, "Our family," with stick figures of 3, and me, slightly off to the side, always smiling. The divorce was final before the summer ended, and no one in that house looked back, not because there was nothing worth remembering, but because the truth had finally arrived and cleared space for something better. Balance, I've learned, isn't a destination. It's a rhythm, one you find slowly, like stepping back onto a boat after standing too long on dry land. You wobble, you adjust, and then, eventually, you float. That's what the weeks after the divorce felt like. Jason's house, once curated within an inch of its own personality, began to shift, not abruptly, not with dramatic renovations or new paint, but through small lived-in acts. It started in the kitchen. The bar stools Laura had chosen, all white, chrome-legged, uncomfortable, were replaced with old wooden ones Jason found at a consignment store. He sanded them himself on the back porch. The children helped sloppily, with small hands and dust in their hair. One of them still wobbles, but no one minds. I was there when he placed them around the counter. He looked at me, a towel draped over his shoulder, and said, "They're not perfect, but they're real." He could have been talking about more than furniture. I visited more frequently, but the tone had changed. I wasn't there to pick up pieces. I wasn't walking on eggshells or collecting secrets. I was part of the family, a visible, heard, welcomed presence. Sunday dinners became routine again, but not formal. Jason cooked sometimes, pasta, meatloaf, breakfast for dinner when the kids asked. I brought dessert. Emily always asked for lemon cake now. James asked endless questions about when his dad was little like him. Jason encouraged those conversations. He even brought down a box of his childhood things from the attic one day: comic books, a baseball glove, a threadbare teddy bear I thought we'd lost. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, we sat with coffee. "I can't believe how much I almost missed," he said quietly. "When I think about how checked out I was, how much I just let slide because it felt easier to not notice." I said nothing. Sometimes reflection doesn't need an echo. It just needs a witness. He smiled faintly. "You never pushed. You just waited." "Trust," I said, "means letting people arrive on their own." He nodded. "I think I used to confuse peace with quiet, but they're not the same, are they?" "No," I replied. "Quiet can be a prison. Peace is when silence finally feels safe." He took a long sip of his coffee and looked out the window. The garden had changed, too. The manicured beds Laura once hired landscapers for were now filled with Jason's own efforts. A slightly messy patch of herbs, a few tomato vines. The kids had planted marigolds that tilted sideways. It was imperfect, alive. Even the air inside felt different. Jason played music again, not just in the background, but music he loved: Miles Davis, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan. Records spun softly in the living room as the children built blanket forts or colored at the coffee table. He laughed more, not performative, just simple, warm, spontaneous laughter. And when I spoke, whether to tell a story, offer advice, or simply narrate some memory from my childhood, he listened fully, eyes on mine, not distracted, not indulging, but listening. I had gone from being background, the polite placeholder of tradition, to being a cornerstone again, not because I had demanded it, but because the truth, once acknowledged, clears space for clarity. One Sunday afternoon after lunch, Emily climbed into my lap with a drawing she had made: four stick figures holding hands. "That's me," she said, "and Daddy, and James, and you." "And where's Mommy?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "At her new house. Daddy said she loves us from there." I kissed the top of her head. "And what's this above us?" I asked, pointing at the yellow swirl. "That's the sun," she said. "It's back now." Jason overheard. He didn't speak, but he looked at me, and the look said everything. Later that day, as I put on my coat to leave, he followed me to the door. "Mom," he said, "you don't have to wait in silence anymore. If you ever see something again, just tell me." I touched his cheek. "Next time," I said, "I'll trust that you're ready sooner." He smiled. "You were right about timing, but you were wrong about one thing." "Oh, you're not just the memory of this house. You're the reason it has one." That night, I drove home slowly. The streetlights came on in soft stages, and I passed a group of kids playing with chalk on the sidewalk. I remembered Jason doing the same. I remembered everything. And for the first time in years, I felt not like a shadow passing through the present, but part of it. New balance had been found, not perfect, but strong, built not from confrontation, not from force, but from the kind of truth that stands still and waits and is finally seen. A year passed, not rushed, not slow, just life moving, children growing taller, seasons shifting quietly through the curtains, a rhythm setting in like breath after a long cry. Jason turned 46 in late spring. There was no formal party this time, no guests in collared shirts with polite laughter, no catered meals or clinking wine glasses or staged group photos. Just us, family. The invitation came not by email, but by call. Jason's voice was warm, casual. "Come by around 5? We're doing something small. The kids want to bake the cake themselves. I can't guarantee the results." I laughed. "I'll bring ice cream. And, Mom?" "Yes?" "Bring the photo albums again. I think it's time we start telling the stories. That afternoon, I carried 2 albums under my arm, wrapped in a cloth bag I'd stitched myself years ago. I also brought an envelope, small, unsealed, no ribbon this time, no digital proof or dates or cold paper. When I arrived, the front door was open. Emily greeted me with flour on her cheek, proudly announcing, "We put the frosting on ourselves." Jason stood in the kitchen, wearing an apron over his button-down shirt, a little wrinkled, a little tired, and completely at ease. The house felt like something lived in, not managed. Laughter drifted up from the hallway. Music, real, old jazz, played low in the background. The chairs mismatched, the flowers wild, the windows open. I set the envelope on the table next to his plate. Jason raised an eyebrow. "Another dossier?" I smiled. "Number. Just a picture. From long ago." He waited until after cake. It was lopsided, the frosting too thick on one side, and sprinkles scattered with chaotic joy. But it was beautiful because it was theirs. The children sang off-key and loud. Jason blew out the candles with a grin, then kissed each child's forehead like a benediction. No one asked what he wished for. Some things are too sacred to say aloud. When the plates were cleared and the sun dipped low over the fence, casting a golden hush across the yard, he reached for the envelope. He opened it gently. Inside, one photograph. Jason, age 7, sitting in the grass with a stick in one hand and a worm in the other. His shoes were untied. His smile was crooked and wild and sincere. Behind him, Robert knelt, laughing, arms mid-reach, and I, younger, softer, sat nearby, watching with a face that was not just maternal, but proud, present. Jason held the photo for a long time. "I don't remember this day," he said. "But I do," I replied. "You spent 20 minutes telling that worm it was going to be okay. You didn't want it to be lonely." He laughed, shook his head, then stilled. "I was kind," he said, more to himself. "You were," I whispered, "and I never stopped seeing that, even when you forgot." His eyes glistened, not the showy kind of tears, the quiet ones, born of recognition, not grief. He reached over the table, took my hand, and for the first time in years, not out of duty, not for show, he held it. The children returned with more drawings, with sticky hands and stories of cake mishaps. The photo sat on the table between us all, a small anchor of memory in the middle of this new life we were building. Later, as I stood by the door putting on my coat, Jason walked me out. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About how I used to think strength meant pushing through, ignoring, enduring. And now," he smiled, "now I think strength might be what you did, watching, waiting, then speaking only when it mattered most." I leaned in, kissed his cheek. "That's love, Jason, the quiet kind, the kind that remembers." He hugged me. No rush, no words, just warmth. As I walked down the path to my car, I looked back. He stood there, in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, taller now in spirit than I had ever seen him. Not just my son, but his own man, his children's safe harbor, a life reclaimed. I didn't bring proof that day. I brought memory, because sometimes what heals us isn't the evidence of betrayal, but the echo of who we were before it, and the quiet truth that someone always knew and never stopped seeing us whole.